Hello and welcome to Vulgar History, a feminist women's history comedy podcast. My name is Anne Foster, and this season we've been looking at revolutions. We've been looking at the American Revolution, the French Revolution, the Haitian Revolution. And it's occurred to me as we've been having all these discussions over the past year or so, how these revolutions all intersect with each other, how the events of the American Revolution in many ways inspired part of what happened in the Haitian Revolution, what happened in the French Revolution, and how they were all inspired by ancient Rome. And just the connections between all of them. They are often, almost always, I think, spoken about like the American Revolution is this like specific thing that happened. The French Revolution is this specific thing. The Haitian Revolution, this specific thing. But there's so much overlap between them. Like there's some soldiers were involved in all three. They all happen in such a time period that there are all these connections. And I was thinking about all these connections. And then that is when I happened upon the work of today's guest, who is Zoe Sivak. And Zoe is the author of a novel called Mademoiselle Revolution, which tells the fictional story of an heiress who was growing up in Saint-Domingue, later known as Haiti. She went to America and then she went to France during the French Revolution. And the book really explains in its fictional narrative kind of the connection, some of the connections between the Haitian Revolution and the French Revolution. And Zoe herself is so passionate about this topic of these intersecting revolutions and what they have in common with each other and how they all each led to each other, and how in many ways the Haitian Revolution led to other events like the American Civil War. So I was just so excited to just nerd out with her to talk about all of this, the revolutions of it all. And this, I think, is the perfect way to sort of explain that it's all part of this age of revolutions. Everything, we all didn't just follow the coconut tree. Everything is a part of everything else. Anyway, Zoe's such a fun person to talk to. Her book is called Mademoiselle Revolution. And I bet after you hear her talk with me about this topic, you're going to want to go and buy a copy of her book. It is available. It's called Mademoiselle Revolution. It's available hardcover and paperback. And here's my conversation with Zoe Sivak. Okay, so I'm so happy today to be joined by Zoe Sivak, who is here to fill in some blanks for us. So, well, I mean, I don't want to be like talking about you without you, but like you wrote a book called Mademoiselle Revolution that is a novel that incorporates the Haitian Revolution and the French Revolution. And then just like seeing your website and stuff, you're like, that intersection is really what you're interested in. So I was like, this is what I need to have on the podcast, because it's felt like so separate. We've been talking about like, here's what's happening in Haiti and here's what's happening in France and here's what's happening in America. And like every now and then a person moves around, but it's like these situations directly led to each other.
To an extreme sense, actually. Anyway, I don't know if I should jump in or what.
No, please jump in. Like I'm just like, teach me things.
So the first thing, I'm really big on nomenclature, right? Like the words that we use to describe these things happening. We say, for example, if we're talking about the war between the United States, or at the time with the colonies, and England or Great Britain, we wouldn't call it the American Rebellion, right? We don't call it that. We call it the American Revolution. We call it the French Revolution. We don't call it a French Rebellion. For a very long time, it was the Haitian Rebellion, right? Or the mutiny or slave revolt, right? But it was a revolution in the same way that the American Revolution and the French Revolution overturned their governments using the foundations of the Enlightenment principles, right? So it is absolutely the same. And you obviously used Haitian Revolution, but I also just like to call it out when people say it. That is the right way to think about this, is that it is in fact a revolution of minds as well as a violence, which was no different than when it was not in a state of revolution. It is the continuation of violence, but it was a revolutionary thought and action. So I just like to call that out.
Yeah. No, and that's really important to say too, because just as I've been doing this season, that's about just like various, I'm calling it like Age of Revolution or something this season. I don't know. I keep changing the name of the season. But it's just because when I started researching, I'm like, we're going to talk about, I was working backwards. I'm like, we're going to talk about Marie Antoinette. But then I'm like, well, then I have to talk about the French Revolution. And then it's like, well, then I have to talk about what caused the French Revolution. And then it's like, well, and that was kind of inspired by the American Revolution. So now I need to look at the American Revolution. And then in the midst of the research, I'm like, oh my gosh, and the Haitian Revolution. So I always try to say like these three major events, and they were so intersecting with each other. And there's probably some soldiers, like some British or French soldiers, were like fighting in all three, like because they were really close in time and But also, like you said, like I think that's really interesting. The episode that you haven't heard because it hasn't aired yet, but but the listeners just heard it, where we were talking about Dessalines, where we did talk about, yeah, like I think with the Haitian Revolution, like as a latecomer to learning about it, sometimes it's it was kind of I don't know. I sort of had the sense of like, oh, it was kind of like a slave revolt or something. It's like, no, this is exactly like the French Revolution. It's like, yeah. So it's just sort of felt like, not knowing anything about the Haitian Revolution, I just sort of assumed incorrectly that it was sort of some small scale thing where like some enslaved people reacted. And then when I started learning about it, I'm just like, no, this is exactly like the French Revolution, the American Revolution. They're talking about like, these were the principles of Rome. Like, this is the Enlightenment. Like, it was just as philosophical. It was just as, I would say more so organized in terms of like the way that they became a military. Like it wasn't just a bunch of haphazard things. Like it was
No,
just as much of a thing as any other revolution.
it was incredibly organized, and I think it used the same instruments of violence as well as education. I think the Haitian Revolution is fundamentally different because whereas in the French Revolution and even a bit in the American Revolution, we used a lot of language of enslavement, right? We used language like liberty and freedom and shackles and slave, right? Whereas in Haiti, or Haiti, which is the kind of initial word that they pulled from the local indigenous people, that's why we call it Haiti. But in this place, they had real slavery, right? Real enslavement, real shackles. These are not psychological. It's not kind of a too high of a tax burden. And that's not to minimize what was frustrating and eventually kind of breaching the threshold of what the people would tolerate in, say, America and France. But a lot of it was on principle, and a lot of it, real economic disagreements about how the country should be run, legitimate, right? About representation and making sure that more people were at the table. I mean, the things where, and I really don't want to repeat maybe some of the things that previous speakers and experts have talked about, but the numbers in terms of the amount of death that happened in Haiti, it is distinct in the fact that it was race based. There's arguments that it is a genocide. I don't think that's wrong. I don't think that's an incorrect way to think about it. I don't think it's a dirty word because it was definitely based on race. The Dessalines himself said that how can you consider yourself free if there's a white man on Haitian soil? Though he of course made carve outs like for the Poles, Polish people, for a variety of people he made carve outs. But at the end of the day, the people very much felt that they could not be truly free if white people lived on Haitian soil. And so the number of deaths in, say, France, I mean, the tens of thousands. I mean, the number of people. I mean, I know we think of Paris and we think of the guillotine. The guillotine was used throughout France. Lyon was actually much more violent. And I think we forget, because we see, thousands of people died in Haiti at the hands of enslaved, people. They went, wow, they were savage. The images of death would look very similar, even if in a different environment, was very similar. And say, I'm more familiar with, the Parisian violence, but there would be piles of bodies. You would see just, I mean, trauma for an entire generation of people, seeing a city burn and seeing a city, innocent or guilty. And then, who defines what that meant? So I just also like to make sure we discuss that there is parity in terms of the degrees of violence, and that they were not special for the violence that they, perpetuated. The only other thing I'll mention as well, because I like to, before we get even deeper into the conversation, which I hope we will, is that the violence that was happening to Black people before, because I'm not interested in is it justified? I'm not really interested in that conversation. I know some people might be. I don't know if it gets us anywhere. I think the thing that I think about is I think about what was done to Black people before. So some things, and I'll just list them quickly, and we don't need to get into them too quickly, but some things that they would do is they would put you into a box filled with nails and push it down a hill, that you would be eaten by dogs, you would be disemboweled, you would be eaten by insects. The cruelty, it sounds almost villainous, it almost sounds silly, right? The things that people did. But this was common and well known. So that is where that rage comes from, in the same way that the poverty and starvation and classism that was breaking France apart drove white people to violence. So I like to think about those things. So I think the best lesson is that slavery is wrong and that slavery is bad. And that's the easiest conclusion to come to instead of, I think, who was more justified? Was France justified in the violence that it executed? Were the Americans justified in tarring and feathering? Were the Maroons and free Black people, were they justified in the slaughter of men, women, and children that were white in Haiti? These are things that you have to think about and talk about and explore. But I don't think you're ever going to be able to say, oh, they were justified or oh, they weren't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's something that I always find interesting to try to do on my podcast when I'm looking at some ancient civilization where it's just kind of like, okay, in the context of me talking about what this person did, it's like that's incredibly likely. You're saying it's almost like cartoonish level villain, but it's like, but this is what the society was, and if you didn't do that, then you would be killed. So it's kind of like, what are people doing around you and what is your reaction to that? Like for us to look back and try to imagine it. But I was just thinking when you were talking about just the way that the Haitian Revolution is remembered versus the American Revolution, which is like, we're all heroes.
We liberated ourselves, right?
And in France, like, I keep coming back to this, but it was so interesting because I was researching this while the Olympics were happening last year. And the French opening ceremonies were like, they had like the beheaded Marie Antoinette singing this heavy metal song. And everyone's like, fuck yeah. It's like they're celebrating their history of like incredible violence as this cool thing. So it's like, okay. And the Haitian Revolution also is not. So it's just kind of like, because it was all white people, it's kind of like, yeah, that was cool. But it's like, oh, but it was Black people. It's like, oh, that was scary. Like,
No.
but it's like, it was all part of the same revolutionary time period. Yeah.
The same language. And I don't mean that literally. It was the same language of violence and the same tools that they had in their toolkit. I side-eye, like personally and professionally, I side-eye the French Revolution all the time. If you read the book, like it is very critical of the French Revolution. I do believe that the only good thing to come out of the French Revolution was the metric system. And then people will respond with, well, liberty and freedom. Like those things existed. They already existed. That commentary existed. They didn't invent it. The French didn't invent it, right? And just like in any culture, in any society, and we've seen this elsewhere throughout the world, in the global South and in the global West, when people are frustrated, they go to extremes. And oftentimes, even within the right side of history, there are extremists that exploit, right? White guy's gonna white guy. They're gonna, they become dictators, they become megalomaniacs. Robespierre is incredibly complicated. I think it's all complicated. And so I can never look at something like the French Revolution and simply say like, oh, well, they were the good guys. Like piles of like bodies that have been stripped and bayoneted, like in the street, like on the set. And like, could you imagine walking down France and your neighbors being pulled from their homes? And I suppose many listeners can imagine because they have real memories of seeing that paralleled in modern life. Where friends and family are being, pulled from homes unexpectedly and without real process. So it's like, it was violent, and it's just incredibly complicated. And it's always very hard to say there are heroes versus villains because it's very easy to be sympathetic to someone like, say, Marie Antoinette, who was an avid reader and a huge supporter of Rousseau and the Enlightenment thought, and yet she was killed and murdered. One could say, who's right and who's wrong? I'm not the person to say.
It's so complicated too. And what I've been learning, like I never really studied the French Revolution until I've been doing this series. And so that's why I'm doing it all kind of like baby steps because it's like, this is so incredibly complicated. And the aftermath of it, where it's kind of like, hell, well, like the American Revolution happened. And ever since then, there's not been a king in America. But the French Revolution happened, and like a couple years later, it's like now we have an emperor. Now he's overthrown. Okay, restoring the king. Yeah. It's like now he's overthrown again. Now it's another Napoleon. Oh no, he's an emperor. Like the French Revolution wasn't like one and done.
No,
it was like a thing that happened, and then there was like 5 more revolutions in the next 100 years. Like it kept going on, and that's just like I can't even get into anything post 1800 because I'm like I need to understand the 1790s.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And every week of that decade was just like, wait, who's in charge now? Like, what's happening now?
Yeah. And the system, the bureaucracy, right? The system of communes and, the arrondissements that are, much fewer than we have now. But just the structure of how they govern themselves, even despite this chaotic time. It was a period of personalities. right? Like I think of these men. I think of the men that were in power and had an significant influence. Whether they were political leaders or artists, right? We know, of course, Marat. The famous in the bathtub. Like these are figures that were celebrity, right, level men, where women would send locks of hair to Robespierre. And would ask for his hand in marriage very regularly. And there are complaints that many other, like Danton, would be very annoyed because women would be screaming from the rafters on the upper, like while they were having, political debates, there would be women and the women supported Robespierre so much, one could argue that that's actually how he rose to power. Was obviously he was popular, but women adored him. And it was women who were very pro-Republican, right, in France, that little r, not big R. And they were in huge support of Robespierre. So, and men were scared because if they went against Robespierre, the women would come after them. So it's just kind of fascinating about where does the power really lie in these spaces.
And I was kind of like personally just like learning about the French Revolution in a real way for the first time myself. Like I like what I vibe with is just an angry mob on the street who's just like, fuck the billionaires. I want to kill. I'm just like, yes, I'm there with you. But then it's like, but that was such a brief moment before it was like, okay, here's a bunch of men and we're going to do paperwork. And like, you're the minister of foreign affairs. I'm like, there's a minister, there's an ambassador. Like, are we not in the terror right now? And they're like, yes, but we need to like have like civil debate. And I'm like, no, where's the women in the street throwing the stones? I miss them. That was the part I like. Where it's just kind of like men take over. I'm like, God damn it. Like,
I know. And it's like, think of the Bastille. That was women led. That was what storming the Bastille was women led. And I think about how different the world was. We in learning about that in school, right? You hear about, storming the Bastille. And then, there was like the Reign of Terror, and then like it happens one after. It was years, right? There's huge stretches of time in terms of like, revolution. It's a very long amount of time. A year is a huge amount of time. And so it's just we're beat to beat. Like you were saying, it's like every other week there was something seismic. And I like know how I feel living in the United States now and how exhausted I am with the news reel that seems continuous, people coming together, people breaking apart, what evil is coming upon us now. Or will the Supreme Court say yes or no, who knows? And can you imagine that? But like the stakes, it's hard to say because I know we have so many things at stake, but it's like the things at stake are your very lives in a different way than I think that what we're dealing with right now. Though eventually it very well may be our lives. But at least looking at it at this present moment and looking back, it's just incredibly, how did anybody keep up? And literacy rates had gone very high, and the number of newspapers, there were so many.
Oh my gosh. And this is in your book too. And we'll talk about your book more later. But
please, yes.
My research, I'm just like, another newspaper. It's like, and he started a newspaper. And I'm just like, how many newspapers?
Just imagine how much, like the access, like paper was cheaper. They're literally, it's confetti, political confetti, where people were able to publish and write and just, share information. I mean, people even in Haiti, or Saint-Domingue, before it was Haiti, I mean, they were receiving, their newspapers from France. And so they wanted to engage in the debates as well. I mean, it's just people were able to participate in a way that they hadn't before. Of course, women can't vote, but women can raise money, women can threaten, women can kill, and women can gather. And so there were a lot of women that were participating in basically all the filling, right, the mortar to the brick of a political system. And it's just very cool how people found agency even in times of great chaos.
And that's the thing too. Like when I started this season, which was like last year, I was just like, oh, haha. I read something about, this astrological thing is happening. And it's like, and this hasn't happened since 1770. And all these revolutions happen. I'm like, oh, that's great. I can tie that into my podcast theme. And then it happened. I'm just like, oh my God, this is like, astrology is real. This is like that.
Oh my God. Oh, no.
It's, I don't know. The parallels, I'm just like, I would prefer if there's less parallels. I mean, for all of us in society right now.
It was a little surreal. Like when I was writing this book back, it was during Black Lives Matter. And so I was my apartment is near a main street. And the Coast Guard had like military vehicles, bringing them in, and seeing that while I'm literally editing the book, it was just very surreal. Right.
Yeah.
We all feel like we're living through something so seismic all the time. And so now we're all really, really fucking tired.
Yeah, and it's really gotten people talking about the French Revolution and the Haitian Revolution in a way that they hadn't, like the memification of the French Revolution. But what I keep appreciating is whenever somebody's like, oh my God, this is just like the French Revolution, there's always somebody, like I feel like I curate a good social media feed. I follow a lot of like really good people. And there's always someone being like, actually, the Haitian Revolution was actually the successful revolution.
It is
Like,
the only, yeah. And they abolished slavery. It was a successful to a true democracy right after. Yeah, it's a little insane what they managed to achieve on this island. There were a lot of things working in their favor, but it's a little nuts when, people are always, thinking of the success of the French Revolution under any, I don't know, like under what objectives you would call it successful.
no,
Like there,
exactly. It's like people just see like, oh,
yeah,
they're like, hey, did you know like women went down the street with like heads on pikes and they beheaded some rich people and everyone's like, great, let's do that too. It's like, but that's not the end of that story.
that's people just have rage, and that's what happened, right? You have a bunch of people with rage, and then those who want to take advantage of that rage, and then we have no end goal, right? What ends up happening is big feelings, big disaster, and a breakdown of society. And then someone comes back because eventually people are exhausted, they're burnt out, and then they're much more generous in terms of who they'll allow to come back in. And then we have a guy who has a little bit of a part in a way to in the book, that Napoleon Bonaparte took advantage of that. He was very, very good friends with Robespierre's brother. They were actually besties in Italy. And so everyone's connected. People find life finds a way.
Yeah, yeah.
It's weird. It's weird. Hmm.
It's also just sort of so for instance, the American Revolution. I think like as a Canadian, I never learned about it except for against my will when people had like a very special episode of Full House and they're like talking about Thomas Jefferson and I'm just like, okay, or like Sesame Street talks about it. I'm like, okay, I'm learning this.
Yeah,
But when
yeah.
I was like, okay, like the American Revolution, it's like you have George Washington, for instance, and he's like a charismatic leader and people follow him. And that was part of the success of that. The French Revolution, there wasn't one guy. That's when I was trying to learn about the French Revolution. I'm like, who was the George Washington? It's like there kind of wasn't one. And that power vacuum is where Napoleon was able to be like, I think everyone wants one person to be in charge, so I'll just do
Yes.
that.
Yeah.
Like,
Everyone wants a leader. People want to be told what to do.
yeah,
It's dark, but
especially in these kind of dark times like the French Revolution. But getting back to the Haitian Revolution, what I found interesting in the episode that everyone just heard that you haven't heard yet, when we were talking about Dessalines, but we were talking about like how when the Haitian Revolution began,
right.
where I was like so impressed that, I mean, like any revolution, it's like decades in the making, right? Of just like people until finally all the pieces are in place and it just kind of like that spark hits and it takes off. But
And a
like,
hurricane hits, which was part of it.
oh, a hurricane hit?
No, that's they saw that as a good omen. They many of them were voodoo practitioners, traditional voodoo, VOUDOU, that voodoo, and so that was actually that there was this big hurricane that struck a few days before, and they took that as a good omen, but that they needed to act then. No, sorry, I just when you said it's like everything aligns and a hurricane.
It did. No, and that's perfect. And you know what? I have a bingo sheet for this season of the podcast because there's instead of a drinking game, but it's just like there's things that happen. And one of them is like weird weather because there was weird
That's
weather everywhere. France had these like horrible winters, like the crops were fucked up, like everywhere. It's just like now.
Yeah,
Like
yep.
everyone just feels like, oh, like something pretentious is happening. But I was just gonna say, like in Haiti, I was like, and this is what I was talking to my last guest about a bit, was like, how were there all of these enslaved people with so much military tactical knowledge and know-how? And a lot of that was because a lot of them had been sent to America to fight in the American Revolution and picked up this training and this skill. So it's not just like a bunch of people who don't have any, with a lot of good intentions and like, let's do this together. It's like, no, there's people there who are like, okay, this is how military works. This is how you do an operation. This is like a land battle. And I'm like, oh, these guys have these skills because, so again, like the connection back to the American Revolution.
Exactly. Yeah, it's all a little. Nothing happens in a vacuum. Everything is connected. We have been a globalized society for hundreds and hundreds of years to some degree. Thousands of years. What am I saying? Thousands of years. We've never been disconnected. People find a way to spread ideas and to spread skill sets. And Jean Dessalines was an incredible teacher, an incredible educator, and he knew how to systematically arm and train these men. And he was very successful. and whether or not I know Haiti has, and I'm very curious to kind of know what your previous experts' kind of opinion on Jean Dessalines is, because for most of his history, he's seen as a dictator, which he was, I think, objectively. But I know that right now Haiti is a little bit more. They're starting to like him again, and I think it's just representative more of what's going on culturally. Are people hurting? Are people angry? Are they disenfranchised? Because then that dictator starts to look a lot more appealing. Yes, he freed them. They very successfully, threw off their shackles. But then at what cost? Though, of course, you could say, the ends justify the means, which I think that's how a lot of revolutions, that's what a lot of revolutions say. And for example, we know that Robespierre really did coin the phrase, you have to break a few eggs to make an omelet.
He didn't, did he?
He did. No, that is actually factually true. He said you have
Literally.
to break a few eggs. You have to break a few eggs. It sounds so silly. That's where it's like, I almost didn't know. He literally said you have to break, a few, you have to break a few eggs.
Of course, a French person said that.
Right.
An omelet.
But guess who gets to keep let them eat cake? Someone who didn't actually say it, but Robespierre, who really did say we have to break a few eggs, is still kind of idolized as this, revolutionary thinker, which arguably he was. It just, he was not a balanced man. Anyhow, I'll let you tell me where we should be going next in this journey.
Where we should be going in this journey is, I think this is where you've kind of led us, which is, so at the beginning of your book, which again, listeners, is a novel, but like based in the history. So it starts off in this period of time that I find so incredibly interesting, which is like Haiti, Saint-Domingue, pre-revolution, where it's just kind of like Bridgerton, IRL, just like Black people, beautiful gowns, the like living this like
fantasy.
Like these castles being built. Like I had one of the first guests I had on the podcast talking about this era was Vanessa Riley, the novelist. She writes a lot of like Regency.
Her.
She writes like Regency England books, but like with Black people and like with people of color. And then she has these more historical fiction books that she writes, and one of them was about Marie Christophe.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and so that also started, and she was the first person who really, like her books, I'm like, wait, I need to learn more about this, because reading that book, I was like, wait, what happened? And I think she was the one who made the connection. She's like, Bridgerton, she's like, why didn't they set it in Haiti? Because it's like, then you could have Black people and it would be, they actually were. And they were throwing these balls and they had these palaces. And that's where your book begins, where it was, I mean, just talk about that period of time, this kind of like brief time where they were, it wasn't Haiti yet, it was still Saint-Domingue, but they were just kind of trying to be like, we are like France, we are like England. Look, we have an elite, we have wealthy people. Like,
yeah, everything you're saying is right. So Haiti, or Saint-Domingue at the time, it was what is Haiti was Saint-Domingue, and then the greater island was called Hispaniola, and it was a French colony. It was run by the Code Noir, so the Black Code, and it was the first kind of legal document that expressly discusses and codifies slavery in that way. And I would argue that the reason that Haiti falls, and this does tie to your question, I promise you, is that they did something very different. So while technically so I'm mixed. You guys can't see me. I'm just now realizing this. I am mixed, right? I am half Black, and then I am half white, but like Jewish and Czech and all that good stuff. So culturally, I would get the law was that I got my basically citizenship, my legal rights derived from my mother. Right. So let's imagine my mother is not Black, but imagine my mother is Black, as was almost universally the case for a variety of reasons that I'm sure you can deduce, was almost always a Black woman. So you got and this is the same in the United States, right? You got your citizenship, your rights come from your mom. Haiti did something different. Whereas, yes, that was the law, that wasn't the culture. And that's why you have to always be very careful. If you look at something as a law and say, oh, people were doing this, that's not necessarily the case. What was actually happening was that it was extremely normalized for the father and the enslaver to free their child. That was not the case in the United States. The fathers almost always owned their children, right? And so what does that create? That creates an incredibly empowered class of free mixed race people. And that is called the affranchis, and that's where you get Bridgerton. Bridgerton with enslavement. So imagine a situation where you have this inordinately wealthy group that still enslaves Black people. That doesn't change. They very well may have, their own family members were enslaved. The disconnect Imagine that, the dissonance that you must feel to comfortably own people of your own race and maybe even your own family. And yet it's fine because you're an affranchi. They had their own cultural norms. There were very, very specific sumptuary laws that mixed race women were not allowed to wear certain types of clothing. They found ways around that. You are not going to find better dressed, better food, better entertainment, better parties. It were the light skinned folks. No one's better at being white than a light skinned Black person who wants to be white, right? And so that's what they did. And that's why there was a lot of tension during the revolution, specifically the Haitian one, because you think Black people you think they trusted them? You think that there was goodwill? You had to prove yourself. And you proved yourself burning down plantations and by murdering and by killing. And so it's very, very complicated. And so Sylvie is mixed race. She is an affranchi, that literally means like a freed person. And she is half white and half Black. Her mother is an enslaved woman. She is dead, buried in a mass grave. Well, she's actually not in a mass grave. She was spoiled with an actual grave on the side of the house. And this is kind of, you will see this across plantations across, North America, including the Caribbean, is most graves are going to be in kind of a mass grave situation, but special slaves will get a special little gravestone. And her mom had one. And she was very disconnected to that part of herself because she didn't want to engage with it because that doesn't sound that fun. We all like to think that we wouldn't participate in enslavement and in this type of system. Of course we would. That's why it's so sustainable, is that people are very willing to sacrifice those types of things for comfort and wealth and power. And she would have been a woman that looked just like me. And she lived in a big, beautiful mansion on beautiful indigo plantations and beautiful coffee fields. Her father was a coffee grower. Haiti has excellent coffee because of the mountainous hills. You want to grow coffee on hills and mountains because of the way the sun will hit. And she very quickly realizes that what she's living is a lie. She witnesses a very public execution of a man named Vincent Auger. And he is very famous. Anyone who's kind of studies the Haitian Revolution, that's a very significant pinpoint. He was a light-skinned man of great education and who was fighting the good fight for abolition and for specifically the freedom of Haiti and the independence of Haiti from France. And they broke him on the wheel, which is exactly what it sounds like. It is like a giant carriage wheel. They break your bones and they let you sit out there until you die from exposure. And she sees that and sees how men like her father hated this man. And it kind of starts this cascade of realizing that how am I not, I'm the child of rape, right? Because an enslaved person can't consent. Her just kind of realizing how her father could love her and claim to love her. And yet the people that make up her blood, feed the soil and rot in it. And she's like, I can't do this. She's also not a very nice person. She's, she means the best, but she really struggles to, she's classist as heck, as a lot of light skin and Frenchies were. And she has to flee. I think she would have stayed in Haiti if she could. That, people are very disappointed that we didn't stay in Haiti. But the thing that I say is that if they had stayed, if they did not become émigré, we'd have a very short story.
Yeah.
It would have ended very something that I don't like to write, and that's what it would have turned into. So they intend to go to France. They go to Charleston because I had to throw Charleston in there because how the United States is so connected to Haiti because we give them their food. They don't grow food on Haiti, right? Just like they don't grow food in Hawaii. The food that they grow is for our consumption. Right. They don't grow things to sustain the people. And we still see this now, which isn't that insane. There's no space for food. So they have to get rice from somewhere. It's the Carolinas. And that's also where you sell slaves. And that's always been the story of Charleston, a beautiful city, but very difficult to navigate without kind of seeing exactly what it was. And so she goes there and that's where she's like, I can't do this. And there's that big falling out. And she and her brother flee to France because they know they have family there, and B, they're looking for some stability because she doesn't want to be in the United States where it is a society again built upon the backs of slaves. So she flees, and with the best of intentions, She flees with the best of intentions.
Well, and then France, and we talked about this. I did an episode, 2 episodes about Sally Hemings, and so the whole
Yeah.
deal, like she was like, and as I recall from what I read about her, it's like in France, like you couldn't own black slaves, but like you say in your book, but like people did. And now for a quick advertising break, and we're back.
So I really love that you brought that up. That's actually such a great, thank you. That was like an awesome segue. So there are no slaves in France. I have an epigraph over one of the chapters because I just love those. They're vibey and they help like set tones for each chapter, right? And one is a very, very old medieval, I think, expression. There are no slaves in France. And that was something that you would have heard and you would have believed. But just like we always have to drive with our seatbelt and, you're not allowed to jaywalk. France kind of took it more as a guideline than an actual rule. So not only did people bring their slaves all the time, but what they did is they created a work camp because they didn't want men to be without their valets on their way back home to the island. So what you would do is you would bring your enslaved person and then you would drop them off at a work camp. And then you would go where you wanted to go. And then you pick him up on the way back. And that is what you did. And the psychology of it all, of Sally Hemings technically being free while she was in France. Bear in mind, she was a child when he took her, for no better word. She was 13, I think, when they met. And then, she was also mixed race as well. And he took her to, France, and that's your entire world, is your entire worldview is like, how much you're worth. So Sylvie has that kind of epiphany of knowing how to value your own skin, right? To value your own flesh. Like, I know how much I cost. Like
Yeah, she sees like a ledger of, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. You would know how much you were valued, right? So a light skin, I mean, we're talking like $30,000, like a light skin, like a child. So that would have been called a fancy in the United States. So that would have been a girl who had light skin lighter than, think of like a lunch bag, like a cardboard, like lighter than cardboard. You were called a fancy, and you were sold as a child, and you were worth $30,000, $40,000, and you were sold for only one reason. So these are all the things that are in your head and you learn this language from birth. It's not that easy to just run away. Like, that's your whole life and livelihood and identity is entangled in property. And it is not as easy, though people did do it. We have, these free maroon colonies like the Great Dismal Swamp in North Carolina. I mean, it's in South Carolina, actually, maybe North Carolina. I think it actually might spread, but it's absolutely incredible how people manage to create agency and society, within a greater one. So Sally Hemings, this kid who went back and forth between France and the United States and was freed when she was in France. It's like, what does that really mean? Are there no slaves?
Well, and then also like her whole life, like there's so many sort of like sliding doors moments of it. But it's like if she had made this courageous decision to stay in France, it's like she would have been cut off from her entire family who were so important to her. So it's like, why would she? And she probably would have died in the French Revolution. So yeah.
Right. No one wins. No one wins in 18th century France. Like, it is such a complicated, slavery is really complicated. It is psychological as well as physical. And I think that speaks to how Haiti reacted the way that it did, is generational trauma building up over and over and over again, layer by layer by layer, until it is just unbearable anymore. And it all breaks. You give them the tools of language, or the tool of like the language of freedom and enlightenment. You get, they are literate and brilliant and engaged in parliament, and at these professional kind of political spheres where these affranchis would go and speak and make claim to what they believed they were owed. They never wanted to free the bossal. That's the word for a bossal, is somebody who you would almost call like fresh off the boat, as dark as that sounds. It would be, a person who worked in the field, right? Dark and coarse. And that's still slang in Haiti now. But they saw themselves as very distinct. So they wanted to make the argument like, no, like, keep them, but like free us, like let us vote. It's weird. People are nuts.
It's weird. And just like, and as your book shows, like she's going between Haiti and then the US and then France, but it's kind of like, I mean, the revolution happened. So like the way of life that she had was unsustainable, but also she was starting to question it herself, obviously. But
Yeah.
then to go to France, it's kind of like, at least in Haiti, if before her eyes were open about things, it's like, okay, well, this is like, mixed race people, and like this is how you
Yeah.
can succeed, and this is a good marriage I can get. And you go to France, and it's kind of like you have so many less options for like what a mixed race person can do. So it's
Life
kind of
looks
like you're
very
being
different.
raised to believe that what's possible. So you have this kind of like what are they, the enfranchise, to sort of
Yeah.
like be living in this wealthy world. But then if you go to any other country, you can't do that
It's not.
anymore.
Well, then why would you want to dismantle slavery if you wouldn't have any other space where you could be free and rich and powerful? Why would you? Why would you? Right? That was the fantasy of it, right? That's what I mean. It's a fantasy. It's not real. It's you have to keep the only way that a free person of color could live well is if there were other people of color who didn't. That's how it works. And that's why, I mean, honestly, I won't go into it, but like that kind of is the root of a lot of the way the American political system is. Like when you remove Black men and women from that tier system, right? It really caused a crumble within the conservative movement, because when you don't have that, you have to find other places to play blame, right? And it's just incredibly, and then you have intersectionality of being both a Black and a woman. So it's like, which is just another layered, complicated, terrible system. But yeah, she didn't want to live in the United States because she knew slavery would cause the demise of any society that it existed in. That's basically what she saw, when she, not so elegant a way. And she was like, well, the shit is going to hit the fan and I will not be here for it. And so I'm going to go to France where everything is great and everything is fine and people are civilized. Right. And then she goes there. And then she's like,
Or so I've heard.
so I've heard, right? No, literally, she has this fantasy of what France looks like. Like she
Yeah.
thinks it'll be because there's no enslavement. That means that people aren't disenfranchised in the same way, and she just thinks that people, that she'll be safe there. It just the point is that it's that no one is safe from white supremacy and how it can dysregulate any society. It hurts. Everyone suffers in the patriarchy, right? Like everybody will suffer. People will end up dead and disenfranchised and angry, and your head will be on a pike. Like that's how it always ends. And then the cycle begins again.
Yeah, and people get upset again. What I wanted to talk to you about as well, and you mentioned this, I think it's in the afterword, but the connection between, well, just to place that for you, I've had episodes about Henri Christophe. We talk about Dessalines. Those stories end when those men die, but like
Right.
what happened? So like Haiti, the Louisiana Purchase, and then the connection to the Civil War. Can you just kind of like give
Sure.
everybody kind of like so? Where we last left off, listeners, was like, so Dessalines was murdered. Christophe becomes the king, and then we've got this like a second sort of Bridgerton era of like elite Black people throwing balls and parties. Marie Christophe is like this hostess. Like this is all happening, and it's kind of like okay, and they're trying to show like it's now called Haiti. There's a king, and they're trying to be like, we are like other countries with kings. Like we want to do international trade. Like put us on par with England, with the United States. That does not happen. What happens?
So the issue, the way that I tie, Haiti in this period, right, with the United States, is that a lot of historians, and I very much believe this, I'm an amateur historian in the sense that, like, I have to read a lot. And I very much believe this, is that there's one of our favorite questions is, when was the Civil War inevitable? And you can make that when was the American Revolution inevitable? When was this inevitable? When was the French Revolution inevitable? That's a great question. Remember, like AP history, like that's a great question. And the best one is, when was the Civil War inevitable? The Civil War was inevitable from the Haitian Revolution, right? So once those people became successful, once we get to that part where we have a king and they have a democracy of some kind, and they have, or I guess it's a democratic constitutional monarchy, and so they're doing it. So it creates two realities. That's what happens. That's when it started, and that's also, I'd argue, you can start to see kind of modern political parties in this place as well, because it again, reactionary, right? So these Black people, now imagine I am a wealthy slave owner in the United States, And just to set the stage quickly, in the United States, up until that point, it was a moral question. Slavery was a moral question, and it had a moral answer. People knew that it was bad, but they recognized that it was better to enslave people and get rich and then eventually free them all. That's what they wanted to do. That was what Jefferson was going to do. That's what, all of these men firmly believed when they signed, the Declaration of Independence, when they wrote the Constitution. These men truly believed that slavery had a timeline and they were at the end of it. They really did believe that. A few things happened. First thing, cotton gin. Okay, we all remember the cotton gin. We all learned about it and how that revolutionized, cotton picking, made it too easy, right? A second thing happened, the Haitian Revolution. Okay, the problem is it was successful. The problem is that Black people successfully overthrew a white majority government, killed them all, and successfully put up a democracy of a kind, right? Okay, so they executed these Enlightenment ideals. So what, as a slave-owning person, as a white enslaver, what does that tell me? So I'm going to react to that as they're going to kill me if I let them.
Well, and I think the connection there too is I had an episode ages ago, but a bit ago, with a woman who wrote a book called Brooding Over Bloody Revenge. And it was about enslaved Black women and their consistent revolutionary acts, which were like, you do what you can. Like, it's not going to be like, I'm going to burn. And a lot of it was burning down plantations.
Yeah, no, that's 100. That's what you do. They're going to burn me. They're going to burn my plantation up. They're going to kill me. They're going to kill my wife. They're going to kill my kids. You can't let these people go. They are beasts, right? That's what you, and you were right? You're right. They did. That's what they did.
That's what they did in Haiti. And that's what they're constantly trying to do to you in America. Yeah.
Exactly. So that's what you see. You are validated, but then imagine you are not a slave owner. You're an abolitionist, right? You want to fight for the liberation of all Black people and persons of color. What do you see? They can do it. They can make Black men, we're not talking about women, Black men can successfully have a functioning government. Those two realities, I'm putting my fist together for people who can't see me.
Yeah.
Like, they are diametrically opposed. Like, that does not compute. And yet they were both correct in their own realities. You now have two realities that have a pretty good line right across them.
Right across the middle of the United States.
Across the middle of the United States. Now, that is not to say there aren't abolitionists from the South and slave owners in the North. Please never, ever, ever believe that. Don't think that just because people lived in the northern United States, they were all Black loving, hippie white folks. That is not the case, right? One of my favorite sayings, and it still holds true, is in the South, you love the individual, you hate the race. In the North, love the race, hate the individual. Like, that is still kind of the flavor of racism in the United States, and that is still the case. Okay, so we know that, but now we have these two different realities. That the Civil War became inevitable. And abolitionists is never going to stop fighting to free Black people, because look what they can do. They can participate in politics. And this is all very patronizing and condescending. I'm speaking as somebody who would have been thinking at this time, but they're going to think they are capable of governance and civility and functioning as higher, men of action and grace and Christianity. Whereas someone who is a slave owner is going to think they are going to destroy the white race, right? They can't be trusted. So how do you reconcile that? You can't. There is no reconciliation. You have a war, and it destroys both sides. But one is morally right, and they win. And so now we don't have slavery in the United States. So it was truly, there's always going to be arguments for maybe different political beats or a certain individual or closer, to the Haitian Revolution. Oh, no, further back, some people make the argument, and this is, I think, is thinking a little too small, but they make the argument that the Civil War was inevitable the minute that, in the 1630s, when the first African slaves and indentured servants were brought to the colonies. You can make that argument. I don't think that's untrue, but I like that one the best. I think the Haitian Revolution really, really speaks to it, to creating two parallel realities, and they cannot be reconciled. And you're going to have a war and fight about it.
That's really, I like, you had that in the afterword in your book, and I was just like, oh my God, that's so, I'd never, because like, to me, just like when I read about history, I just kind of like, it's like a pocket, and it's like, well, this is this event that happened in this time, in this decade. And then it's like, well, turn the page, now it's the 1800s. And when I think about the American Civil War, I'm like, well, that feels to me completely separate to what happened 100 years before. But it's like, no, because people are still alive who are alive then. Like, this is like,
You had people who had fought in the American Revolutionary War during the Civil War. Like
yeah,
this,
it's not that far apart in time, but it
no,
feels to me so, I don't know why. I'm just like, well, one thing is like, Hamilton, and then this is Gone with the Wind, and those are not the same thing.
right, right. No, it feels like they are so separate. The ideas were absolutely the same. These men were the same,
Yeah.
right? The only difference is that we now have a generation of men who had not been born in England, did not share their father's moral ideals about enslavement, and they are now much richer. These are now incredibly richer men. That is a hard thing. People, these Englishmen, because that's what they were until they were Americans, they had known life before slavery. They had known societies that did not found themselves on the backs of enslaved people. So it's much easier to imagine a world where it doesn't exist because you know what it looks like. The men during this, their sons and their grandsons, they don't remember.
Mhm.
They only know this. You're going to give it up for something you don't know? No, no, you're not. You're going to keep it. You're going to be willing to die.
Sorry, no, I was just thinking about in one of the classes I took in my history undergraduate degree, was one of my teachers. I don't think this is even what he was talking about, but he just mentioned, he's like, yeah, I think like 100 years from now, historians are not going to say World War One, World War Two, because the one so dramatically, like World War One set up the conditions to make World War II happen. He's like, I think they're just going to call it the Great War because it was, but we're taught, it's
Go
like, well,
back. That's what it was called. Yeah, just to keep calling it that. I think that's
it was
probably it.
that and it never stopped. And I just feel
Yeah.
like the stuff like these revolutions, like they started in the mid 1700s and they went to right into the early 1900s, really. And it's just kind of like they were all involving each other. And it's like, well, this was this like the Haitian Revolution. It's like you can say began here, ended here, but it's like, yeah, but the repercussions, like we're still living with it. Actually, that's something else I want you to just explain to everybody who may not know, including myself, why Haiti, they were cut off from, what was it? It's like France was like, well, you removed all of our slaves who were our property. You have to pay us back for that. And that's where Haiti just cut,
Yep.
where they like became
Reparations.
the country that we're looking at, like Haiti now, it's not Bridgerton. Like
No,
it's so
no.
decimated, it's so poverty stricken. And like, how did that pivot happen? And how is Thomas Jefferson kind of to blame?
So you actually could tell me how Thomas Jefferson is to blame, because that I may not know, but I do know why we have reparations. It would not surprise me if he was the one who gave the idea. That would not surprise me, just given as someone who has enslaved people his own life and only freed them upon his death. So France was poor, cash poor. And when it lost Haiti as a colony, they demanded the right to repair that loss, right? Like if you're thinking in like loss, I went to law school. It's impossible not to think of it this way. But it's like you injured me, right? And I need to be made whole again. How do you do that? I lost all these people. And so they have reparations. Haiti finally stopped paying those reparations in 1945. I think it was 40s, 1940s. So
It was an insurmountable, unimaginable amount of money, is what France was saying you need to send us. And then other countries also stopped importing food to them, or they stopped taking they were just cut off, right?
they were completely isolated economically. They were without friends. They were punished, right? And so when you look at a place like Haiti and you're questioning like, well, why are they so poor? Why are there gangs? Why is there gang violence? Why are they? And for a lot of people, especially racist people, you're going to think, well, it's because it's a black country. Like they're not capable of doing this, right? That's how you think about it. You think that's why all these countries are poor and struggling. And it's like, well, no, it's because they were fundamentally set up for failure, because of their enslavers once shirked off, ensured either that they were completely reliant on them in some way, like almost like the equivalent of a sharecropper situation, or that they had to pay them back, right? They call their debts, right? Or make them take out loans and have it be from their original and say, the motherland, and have them be the one who sources the loans. Then you completely own the country. You own the country, just not on paper. So it's, but I would love to know, I did not realize this. What was Thomas Jefferson's role
Okay.
in doing this? This is awful.
I
Tell
did
me.
not. Well, he was the one with the Louisiana Purchase. So part of the thing with him, God, okay, this is like someone told me this many episodes ago.
Oh, I know what you're saying. Sorry, but no, tell me.
Yeah. So, but it was because he was the president at the time, and he was like, "We're not going to do trade with Haiti." Was like one of the things he did, because Haiti was like, "Hey, Thomas Jefferson, you also have ideals of like the Enlightenment, and like we want to be like Rome, and like you're cool with this." And he was just kind of like, "Actually, no. And what I can do is this Napoleon guy."
Yep.
Like, because France was cut off from Haiti,
And desperate for money.
they needed money. So then
I
they
see
were
what
like,
you're saying.
so we're going to,
100%.
so then they sold off, like France had the Louisiana Purchase. Louisiana, like that part of America
Which
was owned by
a
France.
steal.
Yeah.
What was it? $15 million?
I don't know.
Like
but it was
it was a steal even then. Like I need everyone listening, please know that it was like kicking them when they were down. Like he came by and you're on the, you're desperate, hand out, begging for money. And he was like, oh, sure, I'll give you 50 mil for your entire house. Like, and just imagine the amount that France would be worth had this not happened. So it's a little, I had never exactly made that connection, but I see exactly what you mean in kind of tying why, Haiti is in partly this condition. Maybe France would have been much more open to engaging with them as a trade partner and as a political partner. But you're not going to do that, especially the United States is not going to do that with Haiti, because then France will be frustrated and might be less inclined to sell the land to you. So it's all, at the end of the day, politics and what people valued. And they value old white men a whole lot more than they are going to value this young, trying to thrive Black democracy, which the world had never seen before.
Or since, I would say.
But
it just really kneecapped them, because they were just like, okay, we're going to, like, we are our own monarchy. This is our king. Like, we're doing it. Like, we have castles. Like, look at us. Like, and they implemented the same sort of like ranks of army and the same sort of like ranks of like lords and ladies. Like, they duplicated kind of how like high society was in France and in England, to be like, we're like that too, but just with like melanin. And but just like no one took it seriously, or it was so scary, I guess, that if they accepted that like no one could accept this as a country, and then just like economically devastated them.
And isn't that so fascinating, though, that you have these free Black people, and that was their first concern, is how do we get accepted by the white elite? It never leaves you, right? White supremacy is pervasive. It is a cancer that you cannot carve out, right? You have to radiate the shit out of something to get it out. And they did what they thought would basically make them more pleasing, is like, well, let's wear the skin of, white society and white culture. Let's add lords and that's absurd. It's absurd. Like, to suddenly, I'll put up a castle and maybe they'll, partner with me. And it's just so frustrating because they're desperate. If racism weren't an issue, if suddenly France realized their error of their ways, they simply would have traded with them like they would any other colony. But no. And it just breaks your heart, and you just realize how futile it all was. And that there is, the only meaningful way that you repair this place is to give them the money that they are owed. You return that money. But France won't do that.
No. Well, there's lots of countries that won't even return, many museum objects.
Just a few priceless, cultural items.
But let alone returning money to them.
Could you imagine?
Yeah, it was such an interesting thing. Like, I've been really fascinated to learn for the first time, really, all this stuff about Haiti that I've been doing just in my research and through talking with you, because growing up, all I ever knew was just like, oh, this poor poverty-stricken country, Black people live there. That's just a poor country. Like
earthquakes,
Yeah, exactly. Just like these disasters keep happening and they're so poor. That's so sad. But just like the reason that happened is because they were so successful.
Yes.
And they were so threatening to white supremacy that they were cut down, and now this is where they're. I want to also mention that I find this very, I don't know what your thoughts are about this. The new Pope Leo.
Oh, Bob. Yeah, Bob. Bobby from Dublin. He's from an area very close to where we live, so he's Pope Bobby.
Pope Bob. Well, when it was sort of people, like when he was named and people were like, wait a minute, what's his surname? Wait a minute. And then like amateur, like genealogists started being, and they're like, wait a minute, that's a Creole name. Wait a minute. He could go back to Haiti. And then like so many culture, like Haitian people are so excited. They're like, he's from here. Like,
yes, he's not, but that just shows how people be having sex, right? And super, super oftentimes unconsensual ways. And that enslavement, and I have like a whole thing about this in the book. It's like where slavery goes, brown babies will follow. Like you will just end up with these kids. And Louisiana basically then became like the definition of that, where you get all of these mixed race children who then have families with each other, and you kind of maintain that. And so they're Creole. Like that is what you end up with. End up with a Creole kid. And then you get this incredible culture that was born out of these free people of color who have mixed blood, who felt ostracized. And so they created an entire culture. And you end up with, great grandparents that are Creole from Louisiana. And, put Bob in a Beyonce song, man. Like, like just do it. I think that's absolutely incredible. Isn't that just how everything comes back in some way?
it was,
Like,
it was so interesting. Like that was happening simultaneous to, I think, when there was so much discussion still happening, like Sinners was still in the theater for the first time. And the whole thing with Haley Steinfeld's character and like passing and what is light skin versus passing. And then Pope Bob came out, and I'm just like, this is so interesting. I'm learning so much about just like,
yes, octoroons, quadroons, mulattoes. We don't use these words anymore, but that was like, it was a science. No, you had to know your fractions.
Well, and for me, for this podcast, I was just like, this is so, like, it's helpful for me just as a person to be able to picture what did these people maybe look like if this was their percentage of how far back was their one Black ancestor. But I'm like, Pope Bob, it's like his mother was Creole. Like,
yeah, no, you can tell. And I'm looking at him, I'm like, obviously you're not gonna, it's nowadays like he could have easily been Latino, like I don't know, but like I knew he was spicy white.
That's what people were saying too. And then Haley Steinfeld in Sinners, like the fact it's like, I was like, okay, so now that this is somebody like her grandfather was half Black. And so when I'm trying to picture somebody like Sally Hemings' children, I'm like, okay,
they would have looked white.
Haley Steinfeld is my visual. I'm like, that this is somebody with that same proportion. So just for me to try to picture it, I'm like having these people in the cultural conversation who we know this is their genetics. I'm like, so when you're picturing something about like, and this is, I don't know, I'll just say it because I keep coming back to this fact to myself because it's mind blowing. Like Thomas Jefferson's household was an example of this, but so many other households in like Virginia and all the slave owning places, like there'd been so many generations of enslavers having children with their increasingly mixed race enslaved women that by the time like you would have enslaved people who would look exactly like the children of that same man. And it's like, and they'd all look like Haley Steinfeld. Like, it's like, but this person is enslaved because that's who their mother was, even though you would never, like, we would never think to look at that like Haley Steinfeld. I'm like, I'm just, So just trying to.
You have an entire landowning, powerful political action group that looked like Haley Steinfeld. Well, that was Haiti. Like, that is exactly. So then that's why I say that was France's downfall. It was raping their merchandise. It was an entire system based on the assault of Black women that then created mixed skin boy babies who thought they were owed shit. And then they wanted it. And then they took it.
Yeah.
It's right. It happens slowly but surely. That's exactly what happens. It starts getting blurry, right? Race starts getting really blurry when you get to
it starts being just really like,
it's
like you can't tell with your eyes. So it has to be like, oh, but this is on paper, this person is this status and this person is not, even though they both look like Pope Bob. And it's like,
and that's why we say 1,000 times over, race is a construct. Because it is exactly what it is. It's not, I don't say, race isn't real because we made it real. So it is real. Like, it's not, I can't, that's silly. People who would say that, I think are disconnected from the culture. But like Black folks are Black folks and white folks are white folks. But like, eventually things start getting, like they start getting really messy. When you start trying to define who can vote, who can own property, who can get married, it gets really messy when someone starts looking like Haley Steinfeld. And you can just go to a different town who doesn't know who your mama is. Right?
No, and this happens so often. I don't know if you ever watched Finding Your Roots with Henry Louis Gates Jr., the show where like he talks to celebrities. He talks to celebrities and he like
Finding Your
reveals their
Roots. Yes. Oh,
yeah.
all the time. All the time. It's
Well,
great.
and how many times there's someone on there and he's like, but I was always told my family was Italian. It's like, that's a Black person.
That's a Black person. Yeah. No, and
Who
that's
like
what people
switched cities and said they were Italian. And like that's your like it happens so many times on that show.
because race is that messy. Like people will say, and white supremacy doesn't stop with Black folks, right? Like you say, even if you're, a Spanish speaker, you'll be real quick to say you're from Spain and not from Mexico, right? Or somebody who comes over and they're from Eastern Europe, they're going to lie and say they're from Germany, right? It doesn't stop. It doesn't stop with Black people. It never has. White supremacy gets in the water. And once it's in there, it is really, really tough to get it out, because you end up with a place like Haiti, which had it had all of, that soil could grow anything. I mean, what an incredible place. And their future was stolen from them. It was stolen from them the minute they were stolen, you know? And it's really, really tough, because, there's nothing I can't say like, oh, Haiti's going to make it. I don't know. Like, what do you do? Is the right thing to take control of it again? That feels wrong. Doesn't that feel wrong? Like, because it's their land and they've fought so hard for it. But it's like, oh, is it that they're incapable of running it? No, we know that's not true. We know that's not true. Power vacuums leave big scars. And it's just really, really challenging. But the best thing that we can do is what we're doing right here, which is we read and we talk.
And if people are looking for a book to read, do you have a novel you've written that you would suggest that they read?
I would suggest that you read the book Mademoiselle Revolution by Zoe Sivak, anywhere where books are sold, which I do encourage, your local Black indie, if such one exists. I would highly, highly recommend it. But there's lots of stories, just like you said. Vanessa Riley is an Sadiqa Johnson wrote The Yellow Wife. There are a lot of books that explore, and I am also writing another book that will explore this. I can't disclose it yet, but very shortly. But I am personally very fascinated in race relations, but specifically with women, because light-skinned Black girls have been with white men for a very, very long time, and it is a messy business. It is a messy business. And race relations in the United States, especially when you can look back and you realize you have a half Black grandfather, identity gets really weird, right? Yeah. Anyway, and you're super cool for being a super white Nova Scotian Canadian who wants to talk about this. No, that's like your little self. I don't know how much ambiguity is in your blood, but we love an ally. We love an ally. We really do.
Well, thank you so much. I will say that my grandmother was from Mexico, but I'm pretty sure she was like a white person from Mexico, but I'm not entirely
Oh,
sure. And it's like, was she on
look at
paper? Yeah.
she could have been an immigrant. We know that a lot of Germans went there for various reasons. We know that a lot of folks have. We have Kenyans in Mexico. Look at Lupita Nyong'o.
Yeah.
Mexico is a melting pot, just the United States is. Girl, get that blood test. Let's know.
I
Are
know.
we a proud Latina? I don't know. I love that, Anne. That's so cool.
Yeah, that's that. So I'm my own brand of spicy white.
We love it. Slightly sunburned in Nova Scotia. We love it. It's the out of her Stanley Cup. I love it.
Well, thank you so much for talking with me today. I was so excited to talk to you. And this really helps sort of because we were talking about Haiti in the podcast and we're going to be pivoting back to France, but it was really important to me to connect those dots. And you're exactly the person to do it.
I really appreciate that. And I promise that this isn't the only place where you can do that. You can connect just about anything. When you start reading enough and you start learning enough about the stories and the experiences that people have, you're like, the same thing happened in Neolithic Afghanistan. I don't know.
Yeah.
You start making these connections and the world seems so the same, And I find that actually really, really reassuring. That's why I like historical fiction. And then I swear I'm going to stop talking. I love how people have always been people. People don't change. And I don't mean that in a really sad way. I mean that people are always people, whether it's, 1492 or it's 1867 or 1945. People, you can kind of know people because people have always been exactly who they are. And you can just see these really incredible stories and tragedies and how they're related or maybe not. But I absolutely love that. So I think having these types of conversations are just absolutely the key to being a wholer person, I guess. It makes you feel a little less disconnected and isolated from the world because you're more connected to the past.
Absolutely. And I will say now, because clearly neither of us is able to stop talking.
Sorry.
I wanted to say,
Me. The problem, it's me.
I wanted
Oh,
to
God.
say, and this is where I love historical fiction because, like, there's so many good biographies too, and that's where you can like really get the interesting information about people. But I feel like when you look at a portrait of a person, you just imagine this like person standing still who's like exactly comporting themselves so perfectly all the time, and they're like a statue of a person. But it's like, no, people are like messy bitches, like historical fiction, like your book, you have like Robespierre, and I'm just like, oh, he was a guy. Like, I've just kind of like Robespierre, and he's just this guy, and he's just like a signature on paperwork. But I'm like, oh no,
Yeah.
he was a guy. Like,
He was a real guy with like a common law wife, and he wrote poetry. Wasn't very good at it, but he wrote romantic poetry. Like you wouldn't like what a weird guy. Like there's my favorite quote from Danton, and then I'm done. I swear he ended up killing Danton. So anyway, but Danton said Robespierre simply can't fuck, and women scare the hide off of him. That's what he said. Can you imagine if somebody like Dick Cheney said, George Bush, he can't fuck? Could you imagine? That's like what it was. Like
yeah.
these people are so cunty. I swear to God. Anyway. Yeah.
But yeah, no, honestly, that's the tagline for the episode. These people are so cunty, colon. Every man in every revolution. Like they're all just like these nightmare people. And we're being like, oh,
Yes.
they were such famous, wonderful people. It's like, no, they were messy bitches. And their side happened to win. So now we're like, they're heroes. It's like, no, everyone's just a person. They were just flailing around like anybody else.
I don't know if you can lead a revolution and be good. That's what I think I'll say. I don't think you can really. I don't know. It could be a good cause, or there could be a good cause within it. I don't know if you can lead a revolution like what we're talking about. I don't know if you can be the good guy. I don't know.
No, you're not going to win if you're just like, I'm going to do everything moral and ethical. It's like trying to win Survivor. Like you can't, you got to get dirty.
Oh my God. Oh my God. You're great. Oh, you're great.
I mean, you're great. I love talking to you. Thank you so much. So Zoe's book, Mademoiselle Revolution, there's so much to talk about just with the revolutions of it all. We didn't get into the fact that her book is a queer story. The main character is a bisexual person who is in a bisexual love triangle. There's a sapphic relationship in it. So as though you weren't already excited to read her book, that's all going in the book as well. And just reminders for you about this podcast. I do want to just clarify that we are still in a revolution season. Her book, Mademoiselle Revolution, is set in France during the revolution for most of it. And the real life people are there. And then she kind of inserts her fictional character into that. And some reminders for you, if you're still listening, then you're a true fan of this show. So first of all, I'm having an in-person meetup Sunday, July 20th in Toronto. For fans of this podcast, we're going to be meeting at a time and a location that I will let you know about if you RSVP. And you can RSVP at vulgarhistory.com/meetup. Just leave your email address there, and I will give you all the details about where we're going to meeting and where we're going to be hanging out. And I look forward to that. Again, that's Toronto on Sunday, July 20th. RSVP at vulgarhistory.com/meetup. And I wrote a book. It's being published next February, but you can order it now. And it's really appreciated to pre-order it now because this shows the enthusiasm for the book. Just so bookstores know that they should get more copies of it. So that online retailers know, like, oh, maybe we should feature it. Like the pre-orders are so crucial. That's why authors are always going on about them. And as a treat, everyone who pre-orders this book in Canada and the US, because that's where it's available to pre-order at the moment, if you send me a copy of a picture of your receipt from the pre-order, I'm going to send you some cool stuff. Stuff like free membership to my Patreon, free membership or free subscription to my Substack for a year, and also a paper doll, which is just a beautiful, fun thing that I think you will all appreciate. Anyway, when you have pre-ordered my book, go to rebeloftheregency.com. The book is again called Rebel of the Regency, The Scandalous Saga of Caroline of Brunswick, Britain's Uncrowned Queen, by me, Anne Foster. You can add it on Goodreads. You can add it on Storygraph. All these things really matter to make everybody see that this book people are enthusiastic about it. And that helps maybe me be able to write a second book later on. Anyway, until next time, my friends, keep your pants on and your tits out. Vulgar History is researched, scripted, and hosted by Ann Foster. That's me. Editor is Christina Lumagi. Theme music is by the Severin Duo. Transcripts of this podcast are available at vulgarhistory.com by Aveline Malik. You can get early, ad-free episodes of Vulgar History by becoming a paid member of our Patreon for as low as $1 a month at patreon.com/AnnFosterWriter. Vulgar History merchandise is available at vulgarhistory.com/store for Americans, and for everyone else at vulgarhistory.redbubble.com. Follow us on social media at Vulgar History Pod, and get in touch with me via email at vulgarhistorypod@gmail.com.